Welcome to Module 2 of the ADDIE model of instructional design. I'm Jonathan Porch, one of the graduate student instructional designers who collaborated on this open online course. As mentioned in the instruction video, the ADDIE model consists of 5 steps that include analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. In Module 2, we will cover the design phase of the ADDIE model. As the name implies, the design phase is where instructional designers begin to design and structure their course. This process is deliberate and methodical and should result in products that are both mature and complete enough to proceed on to course development. The purpose of this phase is to develop the plan that will be used throughout the rest of the instructional design project. The major outcomes for this phase are: determine what are objectives in each lesson or module, determine how course content will be ordered, presented, and evaluated, determine the look and feel of the user experience and design the user interface, complete a prototype, and finalize overall visual design, and if possible, generate module templates. Let's begin by determining the objectives and learning outcomes. As with many projects, you should begin the design process with the end in mind. Begin in determining what your end result should be. Course designers should identify objectives for the entire course as well as specific objectives for each section or unit. If a specific goal or outcome can't be identified for a given section, then it may be better to combine or split that section into adjacent or similar sections. Likewise, you should be able to identify a specific skill or learning outcome for both the entire course as well as for each unit or section. It's important to distinguish between objectives and skills. Objectives are broad descriptions of what will be covered in a course or a portion of a course. For example, students will gain an understanding of basic algebra. A skill or learning outcome is a specific and meaningful action that can be measured that students must be able to perform. For example, students will be able to balance an algebraic equation and solve for x. Next, we'll have to determine the course content. Once you've established your end state, it's time to plan on how to get there. Instructional designers must now establish the order that material will be presented in taking care to follow a logical flow. In some subjects, like history, topics may be naturally arranged chronologically. In mathematics and science, however, most instructors prefer to begin with common concepts and terminology and build towards more complex concepts. The subject of the material will often dictate the order in which content is presented. The next question is, how will content be presented? Modern technology allows many creative and effective methods of sharing content. Instructional designers are no longer limited to simple text or even PowerPoint presentations. Today, there are a number of interactive and multimedia formats that allow for more active engagement with course content, such as podcasts, videos, discussion boards and blogs, and simulations. Course designers are only limited by the time available and their imaginations. The last step in determining course content is deciding how to evaluate student learning. This is typically more difficult than just pulling a few multiple choice questions out of the course material. Ideally, the chosen method of evaluation will specifically verify the skills and learning outcomes identified previously. If skills and outcomes can't be identified and verified through evaluation, then course effectiveness may be difficult or impossible to determine. Next, we must move on to designing the user interface. Once instructional designers have determined the course content and the flow of that content, the next step will be to create a series of storyboards that generally depict the look and feel of the actual user interface. Storyboarding is a great way for course designers to begin selecting fonts, color schemes, and other graphical themes. This part of the process is often performed by graphic designers as opposed to traditional programmers. It's critical that course material be presented in the most logical and intuitive manner available so that students can focus more energy on content mastery and less on system navigation and functions. Flowcharts can be very helpful in determining the logical functions within a course or module. These flowcharts can and should include menu structures as well as any logical functions. For example, A student may not attempt the final exam until after they've received a passing score on each of the unit quizzes. Good flowcharting during the design phase can dramatically reduce the amount of time and resources needed to write code during the development phase. One of the most significant factors that determine the user experience is the delivery platform chosen for a project. Whether choosing delivery content via Adobe Flash, Microsoft PowerPoint, or some enterprise LMS system, each delivery platform has its own unique characteristics and limitations. Many times the project guidelines and parameters will determine the delivery platform, and instructional designers are forced to work within the chosen platform. Other times developers are free to choose their own platform that they feel best suits the operational requirements of the course or project. In either case, it's critical that course designers fully understand the chosen delivery platform and what it can and cannot do for them. Once you have your delivery platform, it's time to move on and write the prototype. The first step in developing a prototype is to determine the prototype specifications. Remember, a prototype is not a fully functional design. It merely functions enough to confirm the effectiveness of the design, provide feedback on design improvements. Oftentimes, a prototype may only contain a single unit or module with very limited ability to change the content, i.e., some things might be hard-coded. Prototypes also serve as visual confirmations of course design, allowing both developers and stakeholders to get a full sense of how the final product will look and feel. Once a prototype specifications have been established, instructional designers must then determine the resources that they'll need in order to create the prototype. Will developers be able to create a prototype in-house, or will they need to contact additional outside people? Is new hardware or software required for the prototype? What's the expected timeline for development? Once funding and timetables have been set and resources identified, developers can finally get started on the prototype. Once a functional prototype has been created, a small pilot group should be used to evaluate and verify the prototype's functionality. This group should be comprised of select users with the intent of verifying that the originally identified goals and objectives are being accomplished. Lastly, we'll move into finalizing the design. Once pilot testing is complete on the prototype, it's time to finalize the visual designs. This process should take into account all of the feedback from users, developers, and stakeholders from all of the storyboards and prototypes that you've completed so far. If all of the steps have been performed correctly, this should be a matter of just tweaking existing designs based off of design flaws identified through feedback. Occasionally, when major changes are needed to the final design, course developers may decide to begin the entire process again in order to more accurately identify course requirements. If possible, developers should complete any style or design templates in order to provide a consistent starting point prior to the beginning of the development phase of a project. Use of templates greatly reduces the amount of confusion and interpretation allowed for developers during development and provides for a consistent user experience throughout the course. Without standardized templates, content can seem inconsistent and even disconnected. As we move on to the next phase of the ADDIE model, remember, the ADDIE model is a cycle. Each course iteration should incorporate feedback and redesign as needed in order to ensure content remains relevant and objectives are being met. This concludes Module 2, Design. Next, we'll move on to Module 3, Development.